Hello everyone. This week's discussion board, the topic is after this week's lessons discuss the Simonson's equivalency theory and how it might affect how universities or K through 12 handle development, implementation, and management of distance learning programs. Well, first I guess we should look at what the Simonson theory of equivalency actually is. Essentially it says that equivalent does not mean identical. Learners access different, unequal, but equivalent instructional strategies, varying instructional resources, or equally individually prescribed activities. That comes from the Simonson's book. Basically, that just says that students do not have to have identical instruction for it to be equivalent. For instance, if I have two students in the classroom that, while they may be in the same classroom learning the same information, I don't necessarily present it exactly the same to both of them. Their learning styles may be completely different. I may have to alter it due to perhaps one of them has an IEP, they have a learning disability, and I may need to alter the way in which I teach that exact same information. It will be equivalent, but it's not going to be identical. It's going to look differently as I'm teaching it to one student as compared to teaching it to another student. As that pertains to distance learning, the video or instructional video that we watched this week told us that there were four main subsystems of the development and management of a distance learning. There was a regulatory subsystem that covered the overall management of the program, the course subsystem that was the development, design, licensing, the training of teachers, and the evaluation of the course. There was a student subsection that covered the admission of the students and the management of those students. And then there was, of course, the logistical subsystem. There would be the purchasing of the distance learning program or other technologies, the maintenance of those technologies, the training of personnel, and the obtaining of equipment. That kind of ties in, well, it does tie in, with what the Simonson text also spoke about. And one thing they had mentioned was during the development is that we need to make sure that of who we're developing the program for. For instance, a K through 12 program would look completely different if it was focused on elementary, K through 5, as opposed to middle school or high school. And definitely different as compared to higher education. So we would need to look at who are the targeted students. Also, are we targeting this towards perhaps students with disabilities? That program may look completely different as compared to what we are if we are targeting it towards strictly gen ed students, with, of course, I'm sure, modifications in place for those who may be special ed. What student supports are in place is another question that would arise. Do we have the tech supports in place? That would fall under our logistical subsystem of that maintenance, and perhaps even the equipment in place. For instance, the school system that I currently work for in the last year or two have upgraded their technology and their infrastructure so that they could use high-speed internet. Before, we were constantly getting kicked offline when trying to do things because too many users were on the network. Updating that, there's a substantial cost and time involved. So we also need to look at that when we are developing and implementing a distance learning program. Also, I believe it would fall under the student subsystem, but also under the course subsystem, and that would be the ease at which the student has in contacting the teacher. It's very frustrating as a student to try a student who is doing distance learning, who wishes to contact their teacher and gets no feedback for days on end or even weeks or more. That's not an appropriate use of contact. It's frustrating. Also, we would want to look at the policies that would go under your regulatory subsystem. Overall, as I was looking and reading and trying to get a handle on all this, there are so many layers. The video, I believe, broke it down really well as compared to the textbook. One thing I did notice that the evaluation process is very important. To evaluate how you're doing things. Are you doing them well? Can you do them better? Thank you very much for your time, and I look forward to hearing from you.